Good morning to you all, and a very warm welcome to this web conference where we're going to talk about ViroGates report for the first quarter of 2021. You will soon hear a presentation by the company, and the company is today represented by CEO Jakob Knudsen and CFO Mark da Silva. And the person you hear speaking is Alf Riple. I am your moderator today, and I work at Västra Hamnen Corporate Finance. We're going to start with a short presentation, not only about the Q1, but also about the very interesting press release that the company had this morning. And after the initial presentation, we will have a Q&A. You are all welcome to write your questions. You can see a questions headline with a talk bubble where you can write your questions. We will read them out and the company will answer. Finally, I would just like to remind everybody that this session is being recorded. The recording will later on be found on ViroGates homepage and on Västra Hamnen's channel on YouTube. So with that, I think I'm going to leave the word to you, Jakob and Mark.
Thank you very much, Alf. We are very happy to be part of this morning and to, as we promised, to talk about our Q1 results, but in light of this morning's release, also talk about the implications of what this has on our business. So with me, I have Mark da Silva, as mentioned, and we're going to take you through a company presentation along with the Q1 results. We have a forward-looking statement, which we obviously have to remind you to read, so I think that is done by now. In general, and as a headline, ViroGates, we are an international medical technology company, and we work in the in vitro diagnostic space. We were founded back in 2001, headquartered just north of Copenhagen, and we were listed on Nasdaq here in Copenhagen, the first North Growth market, in 2018. We are 15 employees, but work very closely with a development and production unit in Poland, work exclusively for us, and we also have salespeople in the field. We basically help hospitals to triage or risk stratify their patients. That is the initial discussion to whether they should be admitted or they should be discharged. So generally, we like to say that we improve patient outcomes by supercharging the triage for clinicians. And I'm going to explain a little bit more about what this actually means and implies. We measure suPAR in our blood test, and suPAR is an abbreviation, as you can see, for a particular naturally occurring protein. It's in the bloodstream of each and every individual, but to a varying degree, depending on the inflammatory process in the body, i.e. how active is the immune system. The beauty of the suPAR protein is that it predicts a potential negative outcome. That is, if the disease is not well controlled by the drugs or by the inflammatory system in the individual. And we can use this both for admitting the patients into hospital, as indicated this morning by our release, but also to help discharge early on. And this is a slide that explains a little bit further about what it is we do. In general, a referral to a hospital can be done, or an attendance to the hospital can be done in many ways. It can be by ways of a referral from a general practitioner. It can be the ambulance coming in with the patient, or in some markets, a personal walk-in to the emergency department. And what the emergency department initially does is they basically decide whether this is a case for the hospital or whether it's better for the patient to be treated with an elective appointment or at home in general. And that can be aided by ways of suPAR, especially if the suPAR is low. That allows the physicians to more quickly discharge the patients, thereby saving cost and hospital time for the patients. Many of the patients, actually about 50% in general, are green, i.e. have a low level of suPAR, and thus can in many cases be discharged early. On the other side of things, we also see that obviously some of the patients are truly in need of hospitalization, and they are typically the patients with above 6 nanograms per ml. This appears a little bit tricky, but we have looked at how our product compares with the systems that are already in use in the hospitals. So if you look at triage without suPAR, that is basically a list of physiological scores that the physicians will do. When we looked at this in a study setting, it shows that more than 50% of the patients, they come out as yellow, and those patients are the most troublesome ones, because those are the ones that we don't really know. The hospital does not know whether they should be admitted or they should be sent home. But if you put suPAR on top of those results, you can see on the lower bar chart that that actually you have a higher amount of the green patients, i.e. the ones that can be discharged earlier. You also see an increase of up to 9% in the patients that are red, but that's also okay, because those are the patients that actually need the hospitalization, so they don't go through a readmission process or maybe a fatality if they're discharged too early. So the whole trick is to allocate more patients from the yellow group into the green and into the red group. And in total numbers, we actually reduce the hospitalization by ways of using suPAR. And that's obviously also very important, especially in times when the pressure on the hospital systems are high, and that's generally the case, but in these times of the pandemic, even more so. In general, we have 3 value propositions to the market. We improve the patient outcomes. That is in the interest of all the physicians, but also of the patients, who should not be incurring additional risk by being admitted to hospital if they don't truly need that hospitalization. We reduce the healthcare costs, and that is due to the fact that we facilitate the occupancy of the hospital's beds in a shorter time, and we also empower clinical staff, and by that we mean we actually equip the physicians, whether it's nurses or the actual doctors, with tools whereby they can make faster and more confident decisions for their patients. You can see the numbers that have been reported in terms of the savings and the duration of time, and also some qualitative statements from physicians that have been using our products. We differentiate ourselves to other products, whether that is biomarkers or risk scoring systems, by always being better at on the prognostic side. So we are not a specific diagnosis stating what needs to be done with a patient, but we are extremely well in saying what is going to be the risk of disease progression for this particular patient. So we are very non-specific. That is the other side of this, and this is what we use when we discharge, because if there's something wrong, suPAR is elevated, and thereby by flipping that decision around and saying if suPAR is low, we can conclude that no serious disease is occurring in these patients with respect to their inflammatory system. We have a very stable biomarker, so it's unlike, for instance, CRP, the C-reactive protein that is mentioned on the right-hand side. That's the general measure that is taken typically with general practitioners for establishing whether there's a bacterial infection going on. That is a highly fluctuous product, whereas ours is much more stable, and that's why the suPAR actually encompasses all the inflammation ongoing in the body. We have a fast system. We have clinical products now that can yield a result in some 10 to 20 minutes. So it's completely adequate for the general flows in the hospital. We have done a lot of clinical evidence during the years, and with accelerated speed over the last few years. We have more than 700 publications today in peer-reviewed journals. So there's a bunch of scientific evidence underpinning our products. This morning, as we mentioned, we reported positive results from what is known as the super-guided anakinra treatment in COVID-19 patients. This was a multi-center study conducted in Italy and in Greece, and it comprised 42 hospitals where they basically looked at patients presenting to the emergency departments, i.e. the customers that we are targeting anyway, with a positive corona test and with COVID-19 moderate to severe symptoms. That means that the patient's breath were affected heavily. Those patients were then either, they were measured with super, and the ones with super above 6 nanograms, they were randomized to either standard of care, meaning they got the treatments that they would otherwise have been given, sort of like dexamethasone, remdesivir, the drugs that are typically used. And then they were randomized to either placebo injections or the injections with this particular drug, anakinra, which is marketed by Swedish orphan ViroGates, Sobi, listed in Stockholm, and the results were phenomenal in the sense that we saw an overall decrease in the patient symptoms measured as a clinical score from the WHO of 64%. Between the standard of care plus placebo versus the standard of care plus anakinra treatment. And those are truly amazing efficacy results that we look very much forward to discussing with the clinical communities now, because this shows a significant prevention of mortality, deaths. It shows a significant prevention of the progression to severe respiratory failure. And it also implies, and the study group will look more into this in the secondary clinical outcomes, the length of stay, because actually if you can treat the patients more effectively and de-escalate them to the regular medical departments, then you occupy less of the crucial intensive care beds. So this is a really remarkable study that has been conducted by our lead investigators group in Greece. So we are extremely proud to have been participating in this groundbreaking study. And with that, I will leave you to the further Q1 report and a little bit about our commercial business with Mark, our CFO.
Thanks, Jakob. Yeah, before getting to the Q1 results, I'll just explain a bit about our strategy and the products that we have in ViroGates. So all our products are under the suPARnostic brand, and we have one primary product that was launched in 2018 that's called TurbiLatex. TurbiLatex is the product that we are focusing on strategically. It's a product that fits into the hospital's workflows, but also the instruments they have at the laboratories. So it's something that all the clinicians know how to use and are already using at most hospitals in Europe. Then we have ELISA, which is mostly for research use, and then we have Quick Triage, which reminds a bit about a pregnancy test where you put in blood and then you get a result from a reader reading this stick that you see on the page. And this is good for specifically going to near patient users. So that means, for example, hospitals where you don't have this big machinery in the laboratory. TurbiLatex, I already mentioned, it's easy to use and it's validated on most of the large instruments in Europe, so on Siemens, Roche, and Abbott machines. Our strategy is currently only focused on Europe and acute care. We have direct sales representatives in the Nordics and Spain and France. and then we have distributors in most other European markets. We have a global market opportunity of 1 billion euros, with a quarter of that being in Europe. And depending on which market you look on, there's different potential net healthcare savings compared to the cost of using suPARnostic in those markets. Later this year, we expect to launch a new finger prick product that's called the suPARnostic POC+. It's a small point-of-care device that only requires a PC and internet connection. You use finger prick blood instead of taking out a full blood sample. It's easy to set up, and it gives fast quantitative results of suPAR. And this product will open up entirely new markets for us. So, for example, the general practitioner market, where it can be used to screen patients before sending them to hospital, but also the more of the larger market of private health tests, could be at pharmacies, could be specialist doctors or other places where you measure the general population in terms of more health information. So those are markets we are interested in, and also in the prospect mentioned that eventually we could start targeting. That was a bit about ViroGates and our company. A few words about our interim report before we also will open up for you, Alf, and the audience to ask some questions. Q1 showed a high increase in revenue compared to Q1 last year. So we had more than 2 million Danish kroner in revenue compared to 445,000 last year. That was quite a significant increase. For a decrease in operating expenses and also a decrease in the operating loss and net loss. And cash equivalents ended on 23 million for Q1. Of business highlights, we welcomed 5 new clinical customers, 4 in Greece and 1 in Spain. We announced that we initiated this more clinical trial with HIS that Jakob just spoke about with the early results, and then we expanded across more platforms in the quarter. Of particular interest for us at the moment is that we've managed to shift most of our sales that historically came from ELISA, which was a research product, towards the clinically relevant products, TurbiLatex and Quick Triage. And this is a metric we are following closely because the sort of the big potential for ViroGates is within the clinically relevant products, which is why we are strategically targeting, but also following very closely the TurbiLatex and Quick Triage sales. And as you'll see, the geographic spread of revenue is still mostly centered on Europe. But even though we don't have marketing allowance in North America, we're still allowed to sell for research use, and we still have some research sales to North America, as you'll see. So, looking a bit further than Q1, what should investors look out for in Q2 and beyond? And we would say that there's 3 primary areas. One of them is, of course, COVID-19. So, as we announced this morning, potential future announcements on the regulatory process with EMA. It's not in our hands; it's in the hands of Sobi to find out whether they want to pursue this. But we will, of course, to the extent that we're involved in it, report on this process. Secondly, it's clinical routine customers. So we announce clinical routine customers when they come in, and potential future announcement of this is also a good indication of whether we are on track to achieving our targets and our objective of becoming cash flow positive with existing cash at hand. And then lastly, of course, the expected launch of our suPARnostic POC+ product later this year. Those were the words from our side. Alf, I'll open up the floor to you and the others to ask some questions to us.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Jakob. Thanks, Mark. Let's hit it off right on, from this morning's press release about the anakinra study. So, the status of that study now is that it is completed. Have they done the 600 patients and they now go on to the data analysis phase?
Yes, exactly. It was an extremely swift process, and again, as we expressed in our news this morning, it's truly a remarkable effort that the lead investigator has been conducting, because we were discussing this over Christmas, and I still recall suffering myself from COVID when we had the discussions, but fortunately in a low grade. He and his collaborators had been able to set up 42 working sites that included patients in these difficult times, and all of the 600 that was the endpoint in terms of numbers of patients to be enrolled were enrolled in due time at the end of March, and the date 28 was the initial follow-up date. And then, as we mentioned, there will be secondary analysis with respect to potential side effects, with respect to admission times and so on. And there will also, as announced, be a process with EMA starting at this point in time with respect to a filing. We are not directly involved in that, other than with respect to our help in terms of the capabilities of Super, but there's a regulatory filing from Sobi on the anakinra drug with respect to a label extension, and that's completely in their hands.
And if we look at what this implies for ViroGates in financial terms, I guess in general terms, we can say that this should lead to increased sales of your products. But how do you see the timeline from here until you start seeing that extra turnover? What is going to happen in the meantime? Could you just describe that timeline?
Yes, I can spend a bit on that. So on the timeline, as Jakob says, we can't really say for sure, you know, will they pursue this at Sobi and EMA, and sort of when will they do it and how quickly will it go? But of course, on our side, we're preparing to both on the production side, we've scaled up already and are ready to supply products, but also on marketing and sales side, we're of course preparing this. I would say in the really short term that there's 40 hospitals out there now that have implemented Super for COVID-19. So naturally they know the product, and of course we will be in a dialogue with these hospitals about whether they would implement Super for general risk stratification in COVID-19 patients, but also beyond in their emergency departments. So that's what's going to happen in the short term. And then of course we're going to take the study and we're going to inform about the study results, not about anything about anakinra because it's not an approved treatment yet. But of course we're going to inform customers and potential customers about this study result. We're going to be doing that from today.
But when the process from here is that now the period starts with data analysis, and probably is that in Sobi's? Is Sobi the one that's responsible for that, or is it the Hellenic Institute?
It's the Hellenic Institute as an independent investigator that are processing the data. So Sobi was responsible for some of the funding and of the anakinra drug, and we funded the study by ways of the Super analysis, but it's with the independent investigator group that the data analysis is going to be done.
Okay, but then I guess Sobi will be the one who will apply for registration of the product, and probably they are going to be very rushed now to send an application to EMA, and I guess EMA they usually have a 12 to 18 month processing period for applications. Do you expect that in this case, or is the COVID-19 situation so acute that they will try to speed it up, you think?
I think, again, with the caveat that this is in the hands of Sobi and EMA, the only speculation we can do is that we know from other events that the EMA actually has an expedited process for something that falls into the COVID-19 bucket. Obviously, countries are affected by the third wave of COVID-19 to a varying degree, but we should not undermine or downplay the effects that the third wave still has on countries like Greece, Italy, Spain, and France. It may be that we at least believe that we have more control here in Denmark over the reopening of societies and so on, but it is a major issue, and therefore the EMA also has stated that they will in general be giving priority to reviews like this. It is in the hands of Sobi and the investigator group, but I know for a fact that and we've seen it demonstrated that the independent investigator works extremely fast on this and is very keen from a scientific standpoint to also get this out in the hands of physicians in all of Europe.
Yes, it is in the Sobi's hands in terms of the process they want to run, but we can also see from their announcement this morning that they will continue with a dialogue with EMA. So that's also what we would expect that they do.
But is it EMA that is the target now, or are they trying to register it in different geographies as well?
With our discussions, we have been talking about a process with EMA, but it's up to Sobi to determine whether they want to take it elsewhere. I know that they have an organization in the US, for instance, but right now it's an EMA process.
Okay, and the product that they eventually want to have approved by EMA, is that a combined product that includes both the anakinra pharmaceutical and a suPAR test, or will they be separate products at the end of this?
It's separate products. The EMA does not really oversee the claims on the diagnostic side, so they don't really have a jurisdiction on that, and also the logistics are slightly different because, as you know, with pharmaceutical drugs, they're dispensed by the wholesalers into pharmacies and so on. So the drug side of things goes that way, and then the diagnostic products or our products are independent, and that may pose an advantage in the sense that basically the hospitals that now know about suPAR either from their own investigation into this or from earlier may be able to better prepare for a potential label extension by EMA and Sobi when that is ready by implementing suPAR now. So they may set this up with their central laboratories, so they are completely prepared for the improved triage process and also the adequate drug that will be used.
I see. And just maybe a silly question, but I mean, it's what they have shown here is that people who are selected on the basis of suPAR, when they get anakinra, they get better outcomes. But how about the patients who didn't have a high suPAR, or maybe if there were controls that weren't diagnosed with suPAR at all? Did they have a group who got anakinra without having their suPAR diagnosed beforehand?
No, the suPAR result was an inclusion criteria, so everybody had to have a suPAR test and a suPAR result above 6 to be entered into the trial, whether they were randomized to the standard of care and placebo group or the anakinra plus standard of care. So all the suPARs that were lower, they were not eligible for the trial. And the other side of that is that obviously we have published elsewhere results from the lower suPAR results in COVID, and also there are indications that low suPARs can be used for early discharge. So Obviously, this does not change the fact that we still have a positioning towards the market of promoting suPAR for early discharge, but now we also play in the more fast dispensing of a medical drug to treat the patients for the more seriously affected patients. So it's basically improving or elevating the playing space that we're in the hospital setting for COVID-19.
I understand, but I mean, from Sobi's point of view, wouldn't it be in their interest to just have every COVID patient get the anakinra, and then when it will sort of self out whether you are in an acute state or not?
No, it will not, because these drugs are generally affecting the immune status of the patients quite eminently. So you don't want to dispense this broadly, because it basically dampens the immune response quite effectively. And if the patient's own immune response is capable of handling the infection, you don't want this drug. So also a provider of a medical drug is interested in having a reasonable comparator between the effect of the drug and the potential side effects. So if there are too many side effects, we see that from the Astra and the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, even though they're small, the medical community are not happy about increased side effects. So the stratification of the right patients is also in the interest of the medical drug sponsor.
I saw. And just one more question about the financials of this. You say that anakinra will be maybe get a label extension where they will be referring to suPAR levels of the patients, and so that means that in order to use anakinra appropriately, they would have to do a suPAR test. Does it point towards any particular suPARnostic tests in your product range? And I mean, does it have any application for what kind of prices you could charge for those tests? Will be any maybe discounts for using this particular, or do you expect the same price ranges as in other products?
It would, the first question to answer that, it would be on our clinically relevant products. So it would be for the TurbiLatex and quick triage. So this study was actually both done on quick triage and TurbiLatex, depending on the hospital you were looking at. So we would target both of those products. In terms of pricing, we would still use the same prices as we have, that we believe is a very fair and sort of a good price for measuring suPAR, but also for the potential outcomes that this test has. So we're not currently looking at special COVID-19 prices for suPAR tests.
And looking beyond COVID, because hopefully it will end sooner or later, hopefully sooner. Do you see this as a kind of a gateway to more general use of suPAR in emergency settings? I mean, I know you mentioned in a report that one of your challenges going forward now is to get people who are used to triaging COVID patients with suPAR, to get them to use it in a more general. Is that sort of your long-term game plan?
Yes, I think that's the short answer. The added benefit of this morning study is that whenever you are associated with a particular intervention in terms of dispensing a medical drug, is always something that plays well with the diagnostics. And as you also pointed out, and the discussion about pricing and so on, we see this as a catalyst for more customers being interested in suPAR, especially now with dispensing this particular drug. But on the other hand, also being able to be acquainted with the product and its utility for the lower suPAR and the earlier discharge. So we are very aware that and we've always stated that suPAR is not specific to COVID-19. Super. This is simply a catalyst into being recognized in more hospitals and being utilized in more hospitals, and subsequently, especially for the discharge, which is the main play that we're in, discharging patients early when they actually more favorably, both for the hospital systems and also for themselves in terms of risk, can be treated with by elective appointments in the hospital or GP segment.
But how difficult or easy do you think it would be to make that conversion from hospitals triaging COVID patients to triaging more general emergency room patients? Is it the same decision makers to begin with?
We have several decision makers involved in the process to apply Super. In general, it's obviously the management system of the hospital that are looking at a balanced approach to having selected cost for the treatments, but also providing the adequate benefits to the patients. We have the physicians that are treating the patients in general, and we have the central labs that are typically associated with running the tests in many instances, and also with picking up the bill for incremental analysis. And therefore, this is a very good catalyzing effect for overcoming the issues of being implemented in the central labs department. And this is typically one of the larger challenges for us to get the central labs getting onto their budgets and so on, whereas the physicians stand typically to reap all the benefits of introducing Super, because they actually appreciate if we can reduce the workload in the hospital system generally, so they don't have the beds in the runways and so on. So we see it as a catalyzing effect towards the implementation with the various stakeholders in the hospital system.
I was going to ask you, before seeing this morning's press release, I was going to ask you about a small note that you have in the quarterly report about setting up production facilities in Europe and what the motivation was. But now I suspect that it has to do with the expected increase of demand because of this outcome in the study. Is that correct?
That is correct. It has to do with expected increases. It also has to do with a level of control, because obviously we have the best suppliers wherever they may be for our products, and especially having developed them, we've worked with selected parties in Norway and in Japan, in the UK. But especially for the triple latex, one of the grant that we got from the EU earlier this year, we're actually combining running some of these clinical studies and also mitigating any risks from having so many partners in the supply chain. So bringing some of that home to our manufacturer in Poland was actually both a level of supply, but also a mitigation of risk of having too many partners involved in this. And obviously Mark can talk about the economics, because we will also likely see a lower cost of goods sold when we have implemented this.
Okay. And this is a new facility you're setting up. How soon do you expect it to be up and running?
Well, it's an existing facility in the sense that it's our clinical development partner that have recently been ISO accredited, been inspected as they need to be for supplying for clinical use, and so they have been doing smaller scale development work and also production work as part of this. So they are fully capable of taking this to the next step. the beauty of our products is that we're not talking hundreds of liters. We're talking the equivalence of small cassettes for laser printers. So it's not. I shouldn't underestimate the complexity, because there is complexity associated with manufacturing these diagnostics. But in terms of the size, it's something that we can handle internally, and we have all the processes in place. So it's mainly a question of developing all the quality assurance, the standard operating procedures for conducting the manufacturing.
I see. General question about the Q1. You showed a very impressive growth rate in revenues compared to the same quarter last year. I calculated that this was I think it was 4.5 times higher this quarter than the same quarter last year. But at the same time, it's a slight decline from Q4 of last year, so the previous quarter. Is there any particular factor behind that?
Yes, there's actually a quite clear one. So in Q4 we had a number of one-off orders that was sort of seen as extraordinary, and in Q1 we really haven't had those large one-off orders. So I think that's the main reason behind it. And I would still say, compared to Q4 and Q3, we're still seeing a shift towards the clinically relevant products. So I believe we are on a good trend there. But that's the reason why the revenue was a bit smaller than Q4 and Q1.
Okay, and the revenue split between products that you have presented in Q1, do you think that is representative of what you can expect going forward?
I believe that we will see a shift towards the clinically relevant products compared to what we've had in the past. I believe Q1 was very strong in the sense that it was above 75% in clinically relevant products. I'm not in a place where I can say that I can guarantee that it will be above 75% in all quarters going forward. So I believe Q1 was strong there, but we will see a trend gradually shifting towards clinically relevant products. That's our belief.
And especially if related to the COVID-19 results, I guess that will point towards a quick transition to latex. All right, I just have one final question, and that is regarding the POC Plus product that you have planned for launch later this year. Is there any news about how that is progressing?
We don't have any news on the POC Plus product, except that we still believe it will be ready for launch in the second half of 2021, and we'll of course update the markets and any developments or changes in that.
All right. Thank you. I don't have any further questions, and I can't see that we have got any questions from the audience. So I think with that we are going to round off this meeting. Thank you very much, Jakob. Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you to all of you who have been listening. Thanks to you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.